So let me set some expectations with you guys. I'm not going to cover any magical frameworks or any growth hacks. Instead, I'm just going to share some stories about some red pill moments I've had, both as a product creator and as a product consumer. And these are moments which changed my perspective. And these are perspectives about how I see competition, how easy it is to lose, and what it takes to win. And my story starts at Skype. So it's early 2009. I'm an eager product manager at Skype. I have the opportunity to work with a great team, great people. I think I've seen some ex-Skypers here. You can ask them. It was a great time. And we got to work on a ton of features, right? So we shipped screen sharing, group screen sharing, group video calling, video messaging, Skype, Wi-Fi. I mean, a whole ton of features, right? And we had a great time. I mean, we saw a lot of growth that first year alone. I think it was something like 50% user growth. We had 50% in revenue growth as well. And so a lot of that time was spent in product development. But around this time, we started to look seriously at this thing, right? The iPhone, the smartphone in general. And it's easy to forget, actually, over time. I've actually brought my old phone. Like, it's a dinky little thing, right? Surprisingly, they weren't actually that popular. If you saw someone with these, you'd do a double take, right? I mean, there's no front-facing camera. The battery life sucked, and the call quality was awful, right? Actually, Nokia looked at this. They did their own internal assessment of this, and they said, we have nothing to fear. This is an awful phone. And actually it was, right? But they just didn't realize they weren't competing with a phone, right? They were actually competing with just a computer that happened to fit into your pocket. So at Skype, we started to ask ourselves this question, like, should we invest in this thing? Where do we put our resources? And so, I mean, you know how this story plays out, right? Obviously, the smartphone just becomes a huge hit. Adoption is massive. And 2009 is also the year that WhatsApp launched. And they, I mean, when you think about it, they had, they are a whisker away from having 2 billion active users. So think about that. That's a quarter of the planet using this app every single day, right? And what we saw is Skype went through its own kind of rise and fall, and WhatsApp went through its rise and kind of exponential growth. So how did that come about? And so let's try and reverse engineer this. I see that there are, say, 3 legs to this strategic stool. The first is that they had a simple interface. And you're probably thinking, yeah, like, Krish, that's just table stakes, right? That's what you always start doing. Make sure you have a great interface. But let me be clear. Prior to WhatsApp, we had these kind of like instant messaging apps, right? Where you'd have people offline and online. And you'd actually start hunting for people to talk to who were online, right? It's quite a different experience. It's surprising how quickly it is to forget this. So And I remember when a friend asked me about WhatsApp, she asked, are you using WhatsApp? And I said, no, what is it? It's kind of below my radar at the time. And she said, it's like free SMS. And I'm like, free SMS? I don't think it works like that. And when I saw the app on her phone, I could see what she meant. Because if you knew how to use SMS, you knew how to use WhatsApp. Right? It was a very simple to switch over. You didn't have to be particularly tech savvy to use it. And they also had really low battery consumption. The second leg of the strategic stool was that they built up a critical mass in a very short amount of time. So one way they did this is they kind of blurred the lines, if you like, between sending a message and sending an invite. So you'd open up your phone, and if your contacts were on WhatsApp, that's great. And if they weren't, it would just kind of transform that message into an invite. And so they created this kind of virtuous loop, if you like. They also set up these tier 2, tier 3 telco partnerships, right, where they had WhatsApp pre-installed on these phones, especially these challenger telcos. And so they already started off with a sizable set of users that are on WhatsApp, right? So it was almost a way for them to start igniting growth. But it was this third leg of the stool where they saw this massive growth. And again, it's so easy to forget previous experiences, right? But prior to WhatsApp, you had to sign in to the app, okay? And if you forgot your password, oftentimes people would just sign up again, maybe under a different name. Then you had to find your friend, and if they were called John Smith, good luck with that. And sometimes they'd maybe call themselves, I don't know, like Johnny Boy 1234. Okay, no chance of finding them. Then you had to send a contact request. They then, when they were online, had to accept the contact request. And only when you were both online at the exact same time could you then start a conversation, right? And WhatsApp came along and removed all 5 friction points. So let's just reflect on this. They had these 3 legs to their strategic stool. They had to do all 3. But what was their guiding principle, if you like? What was the question they were asking themselves that kind of laid that path? And my contention is they were asking themselves, how do we reduce time to first conversation to almost nothing? Because they knew if they could do that, job done, right? And just to put this into perspective, at Skype, we had 1,000 people working at Skype. WhatsApp, at the time of the Facebook acquisition, had 55. So think about that. $19 billion, 55 employees. I mean, really? We spent all that time at Skype working on these features? Interesting. So let's think about this another way. This is Skype. This is our competitive landscape. And, we didn't even really, WhatsApp wasn't even on our radar. And when it was, they were kind of a different app, right? I mean, they were competing by the dimension of form factor. They were mobile, they were messaging. it was kind of quite easy to dismiss them because our attention went to players like us, to other desktop calling apps. For some of you might remember there were the likes of Uvu and a few others out there, right? That's where our attention went. I mean, we would say we're in the business of communication, but that's where our attention went. And even when we did recognize them full on as a competitor, it was kind of too late. They owned that whole communication space. So this was, this is the moment where I think I had this kind of paradigm shift, where I saw things very differently. I started to see things that were previously invisible to me, actually. Right? And one of the insights, or one of the perspectives I had, is that competition is often not who or what you think it is. Right? It started to kind of really open up my lens as to what we really think of as competition. Because your attention goes to the competitor that you see, right? That's directly in front of you. But if we had to kind of take a flip side of this, and this is Justin Kan, who founded Twitch. I mean, what he's saying here is you're kind of competing with apathy, right? You're competing sometimes against the status quo. And so if I read between the lines, I think that we start thinking about competition in a much broader sense. Right? I mean, who here, for example, works in B2B? Who's in B2B? Okay, so about like maybe a third of you, half of you. So, a lot of you, I would argue, a sizable number of you are competing probably with a spreadsheet, right? But that's not always where our attention goes. How do we actually absorb that larger market? So I kind of visualize it like this. So imagine this is you, and then these are your competitors. What if you could compete by a different dimension and thereby change the basis of competition? So let's go through an example here. But first, a pop quiz. Okay, for any film buffs out here. Let's go back. Giving it away, giving a clue here. The question was this. Maybe that will help. The question is this, which is, the first film gets commercially released on DVD. And the year is 1997. Anyone care to guess what movie that is? Twister. Yay. Gold star to the man at the front. Cool. Yes, Twister is the first film to be commercially released onto DVD. And the following year, Netflix gets launched. Netflix are actually in the business of DVD delivery. Okay? 1998. And the biggest player, probably in this video rental space, is Blockbuster. So actually, by a show of hands, who here has a Netflix account? Okay, I see a sea of hands. Basically, everyone has Netflix. Okay, what a surprise. Who here has actually even seen a Blockbuster? Okay, all right, so about half. But just for the other half, and to put it into perspective, and this kind of sounds antiquated when I think about this now, but it was kind of like this. You go to your local high street, you go to this bricks and mortar store, and you'd browse these videos, VHS cassettes and DVDs, and you'd pick a couple and pay £3 a pop, for 24 hours, 40 hours. But don't underestimate these guys. These were this is like a $6 billion giant. They were huge, right? And when Netflix appeared on the scene, I mean, they weren't, they They were like an ankle biter. They were barely noticed, right? And it took Blockbuster 6 years to recognize them as a competitor. That is, that's how long it took them to do DVD by post, right? And then something interesting happened. 2007, Netflix starts streaming. So they're now in the business of online streaming. Probably the business you know them for today, right? And Blockbuster again, it takes them 4 years before they respond to this. And actually some other players appear in the market too, okay? And so Blockbuster are like, yeah, we do streaming too, right? But then we see some consolidation in the market. And actually, Blockbuster soon after declares bankruptcy. They cannot manage hosting these big server farms, right? And this bricks and mortar store. It's too much. They just buckle under. And then interestingly, Amazon come onto the scene, acquire LoveFilm, and are like, yeah, we're into online streaming too, right? So interesting. So they were in the business of DVD delivery. Now they're into business of streaming. But it was 2013 where I think they really made a name for themselves, because that's when they bought House of Cards. And they didn't just buy House of Cards. They put all their chips on the table and paid $100 million for 2 seasons up front for House of Cards, right? And this is completely unheard of at the time. We're talking about a company that's never done content and paying a 9-figure sum. People were telling them they were crazy. And they kind of were. I mean, that's a lot of money, right? But when they release House of Cards, it's a huge success. Their subscriptions go through the roof. Everyone wants Netflix, and they stay on Netflix as well. So they got lucky, right? Like, how did that happen? Well, they'd been watching you for the last 6 years, right? They watch what you rewind, what you forward, what you pause, the shows that you get hooked to, the day, the moment, the scene that you actually get hooked to a show, right? They know you. They also know the gaps in the market, right? They see that whenever they release political drama, it gets soaked up straight away, right? And the likes of David Fincher and Kevin Spacey, they can see they have a huge following. I mean, at least in 2013. Kind of different now, I guess. So, you know, for them, this wasn't a creative decision. This was maths. And it was just a case of how much. So Netflix are in the business of content creation. So they've gone effectively into their third business, right? Content creation. And not just content creation, premium content. And they have some really interesting bedfellows now. So they got the likes of HBO and Disney, for example. And these guys are scared. And it takes them a while, but they start adapting too. So they start HBO Go. We now have Disney Plus. And of course, Amazon are like, yeah, we do content creation too. And you know, you've got HBO with the likes of Game of Thrones, okay? Huge following. Disney have got their flagship show would be, it's quite new, but Star Wars Mandalorian. And Amazon, I heard last year they paid $250 million for Lord of the Rings TV show. right? So this is huge money now. This is big money. Now, Reed Hastings, he doesn't really stay awake at night thinking about HBO and Disney, right? He thinks about competition in a very different way. I mean, he says here, we compete with drinking a bottle of wine. I would argue that's a compliment rather than competition, personally, at least for me. But my contention here is that he's thinking about, at the end of the day, when you unwind, that's the competition. What you decide to do at that moment, that's the competition. That's a much broader market than just thinking of HBO and Disney. So let's think about this. Like, what if you're Reed Hastings now? What are you going to do? You're the CEO of Netflix. You've gone through 3 versions, right? V1, so help me out here. V1 is what? DVD delivery. V2, online streaming. V3, we have content creation. What are you going to do now? Because this is a very competitive space now. People see the money on the table, right? I mean, I don't even have space for Apple TV, right? For Hulu, for Gaia. I mean, there are a whole host of players now in this space. So what are you going to do? So let's play that game. So it's the end of the evening. You come back from work, a hard day's work of product management. You slump in your sofa, and what are you going to do? So maybe you crack open your Xbox controller. Why not? You're in front of the TV. What if Netflix did that? What if Netflix went into gaming? I mean, it's not too far a stretch. You're watching an episode of, say, Witcher, and at the end, you're offered to watch the next episode, or maybe, boom, you just jump in and play a game and immerse yourself into that episode you just watched. Maybe you unlock new content, right? It would not surprise me if they move into the gaming space. What else? Netflix and chill. They're competing with the chill, man. Maybe they move into the hotel business. Pay by the hour, who knows? But on a more serious note, maybe, I mean, it's a little off-brand, but maybe they start like Netflix X, right? Where they farm off their R-rated content, so horror, right, action, and the like. They could farm that off and actually segment all the family content into the main Netflix subscription. It's a possibility. What else? So maybe they can look at the social aspect here. So end of the evening, you're going to go out with friends, have a meal and movie. So they could, for example, have partnerships with some cinema chains and have exclusive content for Netflix Plus subscribers, right? Maybe they have director commentary, post-movie analysis, certain events, certain content that you see exclusively in these cinema chains. I don't think it's very scalable, but they could do that. Or what if you're watching Netflix at home, you're watching a show, maybe Orange is the New Black, right? And you call your friends in. What if your friends, you could call them into Netflix, and you see a roster of people there. So actually you can experience the show with your friends. So maybe you see the moments they cry, the moments they laugh, the moments they're shocked, and you can experience that together, right? I mean, these are just a few dimensions by which we can compete, but there are many more. So let's just reflect on this. If you focus on the product, you're going to get more product, right? And that's fine. That's fine, at least in the early days. But eventually you're going to hit this brick wall, this principle of minimum differentiation. And who here has been in product for, say, 4 years plus? Okay. So some of you may relate to this, which is, this principle is really stating that over time you end up looking like your competitors, right? And it kind of works like this. Let's say your competitor comes out with feature A. And your users are asking, when are we going to get feature A? And your execs are asking, what's going on with feature A? How are you getting along with feature A? And guess what you do? You release feature A, right? Or a version of it. But also your competitor is having a similar conversation when you release feature B. Guess what? A quarter down the line, maybe 2 quarters down the line, they have feature B too, right? So it's like this death by 1,000 cuts, kind of self-inflicted cuts, right? And eventually you get to this thing, right? I just pulled this from some random page. But, the only difference between you and a competitor is a tick box. And that is a game you do not want to play. So think of it like this. This is the market, and you're all fighting for a slice of the market, right? And that can get quite cutthroat. But if you look for other dimensions to compete by, there's like this invisible pie that's available to you. And I contest it's always there. You just need to look for it. And so I would ask you to, maybe when you go back, ask these kind of questions with your colleagues. Ask the question, what business are we in? They might look at you thinking you're stir crazy because it'll be really obvious to them. Or they might be scratching their head because they have no idea. But actually, either one is a little worrying. You need to continually ask yourself that because it often changes. And then ask yourself who or what you're competing with. Right? Who is the competitor? Your competitor might be a notepad and pen. So think about different dimensions to compete with. Look for what others don't see. And look for the invisible pie. I don't think I mentioned it, but I work at Pipedrive. So we provide tools that help organizations get more leads, close deals faster, and to nurture their contacts. And with that, I thank you.